Welcome back, Sebastian here. So today I'm going to be talking about driver options for Cadillac for the 2026 F1 season as they begin their journey as F1's 11th team. Now I'm recording this video on Sunday of the Chinese Grand Prix, just before the Grand Prix. And obviously there's been news going around the paddock already about how, Liam Lawson's in trouble already. And what Red Bull decide to do should those struggles continue could definitely influence things and change, perhaps take some of the drivers from this list out of consideration for that Cadillac seat. So again, this could all be quite irrelevant in a couple weeks time, in a month's time, but again, this is just as of recording of this video. So today I want to go over 8 different options who I think are the probably eight most likely candidates for the 2 Cadillac seats for next year. You have a couple of experienced drivers, a couple of younger drivers, a couple of rookies, and a couple of drivers who aren't really anywhere on the F1 ladder right now. So let's get right into it. Let's talk first about our 2 kind of experienced drivers who I think would be most likely for Cadillac should they decide that they want to go with a pretty veteran-heavy lineup. And I would say there's a pretty good likelihood that one of these 2 drivers will end up being on the Cadillac's roster for next year. So first up is Valtteri Bottas, 35 years of age. Currently, he is a Mercedes reserve driver, but of course was driving for Sauber as late as last year, I guess you could say. Very experienced driver, 246 starts in Formula One. And for this video, the stats, kind of advanced stats I decided to include in this are my new quality rating and race rating, as well as the career points above expected. Quality rating, basically you basically give it a score. Positive, a positive number is bad, a negative number is good, 0 is kind of just average, I would say. Race rating, same kind of concept, but the other way around. A big positive number is really good. A big negative number is pretty bad. And I've also put the rank within that year as well, just for a bit of context. Career points above expected is basically just all the points that drivers scored in their career divided by the expected points that they've accumulated over all the races that they've done in Formula One, and then also that rank within kind of the model. 100% kind of seen as average, or seen as what you would be expected to get. Anything above 100 is more than expected. Anything less than 100 is obviously a bit less than expected. So suggesting that they're not getting as many points as they should based on their starting position. So quality rating, negative 0.071, so that ranked 11th last year. So again, average. Race rating, the asterisk as well for race rating is because the model is not completely finished yet, so it's just the raw values without taking things like age and experience into consideration. And basically the strength of the driver lineup as well is basically what's not taking into consideration. But for race rating, negative 0.989. Which ranked 18th, so not super good. To be honest, I think Bottas's 2024 season qualifying was pretty good. Pretty much obliterated Zhou over the course of the season. I definitely would agree in the sense that I felt like in the races he wasn't really finishing as high up as he should, not really capitalizing on some of the crazy races. And as it would turn out, Zhou was the driver who would end up scoring all 4 of the team's points. Again, a bit fortuitous there, but again, the car was very, very bad, so it's not like he was expected to score a boatload of points there. For career points, when expected, 93%, so again, a little bit below 100. And out of the 16 drivers that are eligible to be ranked in the front running model, basically they've spent a certain percentage of their career in front running cars. He ranks 12th out of the 16 drivers, so not particularly strong there. I think for Bottas, he would be a very stable, dependable driver. Qualifying, I think, even at the age of 35 is still going to be pretty good. The race pace, the racecraft, I think, is, again, not great at this point. It's never been one of his strengths, but I do think he's probably one of the best drivers available for Cadillac for 2026. So I do think he's a pretty realistic option for the team should they decide that they want to pick him up. Now, the other veteran that I want to talk about, I think a driver who in the coming weeks and months, they're I guess this driver's stock might actually go up despite the fact that, he's not on the grid, and that is Sergio Perez. Now, again, like Bottas, 35 years of age, so this is not a driver that you're going to have around for, 10 plus years for sure. And of course, this year, I don't think he's doing any racing of any kind. He's not a reserve driver. Last year, of course, was with Red Bull, and then in somewhat infamous odd circumstances, basically had his contract broken over the winter months after signing a new 2-year contract in the spring of last year. Again, very similar to Bottas, a very experienced driver, 281 starts, but a very, very rough 2024 season that I think when you compare, a very, very rough 2024 season. But when you look at what's kind of going on with Lawson right now, as of recording of this video, he's qualified 18th, 20th, and 20th in 3 qualifying sessions. Hasn't gotten really anywhere close to about within a second of Max Verstappen. And you start to wonder, well, was Perez really actually that bad, or is this car really that difficult to drive? And, it's not like Lawson had a bad 2024 bad partial 2023 either. He, I think, was seen as, relatively good, looked like he could develop into a pretty good driver. So the fact that he's struggling so much, I think, really has put kind of a new perspective on what was going on with Perez last year. And I think if, let's say Lawson continues to struggle this way, or even if they switch drivers, put someone else in, and that driver also struggles as well, I do think that, again, it would kind of redeem Perez in some ways and may make him a pretty attractive option for a Cadillac for next year. But let's take a look at those quality and race ratings. So quality rating, positive 0.263, so not very good, ranks 19th out of 22 drivers. Race rating somehow even worse from a ranking perspective, negative 1.653, which ranked 21st out of 22 eligible drivers, only ahead of Logan Sargent. Career points above expected, 84%, so not particularly strong there. And that ranks 13th out of 16 drivers in the front-running model. Again, if you were to remove his 4 years at Red Bull, his rating would be well over 100% based on his time at Force India, Racing Point, and at Sauber. I think the other thing for Perez as well, he does, of course, if you were to sign for Cadillac, he would bring quite a bit of sponsorship money, and that would definitely be useful for a new team. So I do think that's one slight advantage he does have over some of these other drivers that I'm going to be talking about today, that if he still wants to drive in F1, assuming that the sponsors would, come and sign for, have some kind of relationship with Cadillac, should he sign there, he could be a pretty, interesting option for the team. Now, those are the two most experienced drivers who I would say have a good shot of getting the Cadillac seat. Other drivers like Ricciardo, Magnussen, I guess, you could throw in there as kind of other drivers who, might be options as well. But just given kind of the news and kind of news circulating those surrounding those drivers and kind of their career moves to date, I guess with respect to this year, I think a bit less likely that they're really interested in kind of getting back into F1. Magnussen's going off and doing endurance racing in WEC this year. Ricciardo, I don't think he's doing any racing at all. And again, while that same could be said for Perez, not doing any racing, it does seem like the news around Perez is that he kind of wants to get back into the sport. And again, with Bottas, he's a reserve driver right now. So again, he's still kind of staying within the F1 bubble. So now I want to move on to the two more younger drivers, but still those who have F1 experience. So the first one is Yuki Tsunoda, out of a contract at the end of this season, 24 years of age. This year, of course, driving for Racing Bulls. In terms of F1 experience, 88 starts, again, quite short of what Bottas and Perez have achieved. But by the end of the season, we will have over 100 race starts in Formula One. Now, when you look at the quality rating and race rating from last year, again, comparable with Bottas in terms of quality rating, negative 0.55, which ranked 12th. Race rating a little bit better, but a little bit below average, a negative 0.395. So still a bit better than Bottas and a bit better than Perez in that respect. Career points above expected, 84%, which ranks 19th out of 32 drivers in the midfield driver model. For Tsunoda, I really think he is going to want to leave the Red Bull kind of ecosystem. And I think, he's good enough at this point that he could probably sign for, again, a new team like Cadillac, and he can try to build that team around him and make that team his own. Of course, with Arvid Lindblad kind of waiting in the wings and doing Formula 2 this year, and the fact that he already has the points for a super license, highly likely that he's going to be in one of Red Bull's 4 seats for 2026. But that being said, with Lawson's massive struggles to start the season, it does change the calculus quite a bit. And I do think that depending on how things go in the coming weeks and months, there's a possibility that Tsunoda could be in the Red Bull instead. And it could be, Lawson, for example, being the one driver who makes way for Lindblad to join the grid next year. But that being said, should Tsunoda wish, again, he's out of a contract at the end of the season, he could go off and sign for Cadillac. So I do think he would be a good young option. And if they wanted to go with a little bit of a younger lineup, not rely on drivers in their 30s, I think Tsunoda could be a really interesting driver for the team to build around. Now, another driver who I think is on the younger side, not sure if this driver certainly would not be my first choice, but again, he has been linked to the team, so that's why I'm going to include him in this video, and that is Guangyu Zhou. So for Zhou, 25 years of age this year, he's a Ferrari reserve driver, but of course was Bottas's former teammate at Sauber for 3 years. In terms of F1 experience, pretty similar level to Tsunoda, 68 starts, but I did feel he had a pretty poor season last year, especially in qualifying, but I think was a little bit better in the races, and the quality ratings and race ratings kind of bear that out. So quality rating, a positive 0.683, which ranks 622nd out of 22 drivers, so that's worst of all the drivers, even worse than Logan Sargent. I felt he really struggled in qualifying this past year. I think just the Sauber being such a poor car, I think it really, for the general public, I think it really masked how bad he was in qualifying in terms of his gap to Bottas, and I think in terms of getting to where the car was capable of. The races for Zhou, I think, were a little bit better. It did feel like he was a little bit more opportunistic than Bottas. And of course, did pick up that 8th place finish at the Qatar Grand Prix, which gave Sauber those 4 points, but being their only 4 points of the season. Peugeot as well does have some sponsorship backing from China, and given that what I've seen online, it seems like China is a pretty important market for Cadillac, so having that kind of connection there might help as well. Another interesting one as well is that I think the team principal for Cadillac, Graham Loudon, is also Guangyu Zhou's manager. So again, a bit of a conflict of interest there, but again, he does kind of have connections already with personnel at the Cadillac team. In terms of career points above expected, 89%, so not terrible, but it does rank 24th out of 31 drivers in that backmarker points model, so not particularly strong there. So those are kind of our 4 drivers with F1 experience. Now we're going to talk about 4 drivers who don't have any F1 experience, but I think have to varying degrees some connections with the Cadillac team in terms of viability for one of those 2 seats. So first up is Alex Palou, your triple IndyCar champion, 27 years of age. Of course, this year driving an IndyCar for Chip Ganassi Racing. Again, no F1 experience, but he does have 82 races in IndyCar, and I believe he also did Super Formula in Japan before that. Like I said, triple champion. He's won the IndyCar championship 3 times, including the last 2 years. In his IndyCar career, 13 wins, 7 poles. It's hard for me to really comment much more about this driver and the next driver we have on our list, as I don't watch that much IndyCar, don't have the time, and it's also on at a terrible time for me living in Japan. So as the race is always at like 2 or 3 in the morning. But again, I do think Palou would be a really interesting option. In terms of European experience, in terms of kind of the road to Formula 1, the highest he ever got was GP3, which was kind of the precursor to the international Formula 3 level. And he raced there in 2015, 2016, had middling results at best, but from what I understand, he was in a pretty poor car, so it's not like he would have been expected to win the championship. And I think he kind of really ran out of funding, didn't have the funds to either get to a better team or to progress to what was GP2 at the time. That being said, his results in IndyCar are very strong. Definitely kind of one of the best, if not the best drivers on the grid currently. And in the past, especially late 90s, early 2000s with Jacques Villeneuve, Juan Pablo Montoya, having that kind of pipeline of drivers who succeeding in IndyCar, moving over to F1 was definitely a viable option. I think unfortunately the super license point system has made it much more difficult for IndyCar drivers to move over to F1. And again, for political reasons, FIA is never going to give enough points to the IndyCar drivers, relative to I think what those positions in the IndyCar Championship are actually worth. And that's something that is definitely an issue for the next driver that I'm going to talk about, which is kind of spoiling who it is. That being said, for Plo, I think he would be a really interesting option. I would not, I wouldn't, if I was Cadillac, I wouldn't sign Pelot to be the number one driver. I would really want to have an experienced driver like a Bottas or a Perez with Pelot alongside him. Even someone like Sonoda, I think, would be a good fit. But I think I would really want to have a proven driver, someone who would be, a pretty strong benchmark in Formula One. If I were to bring in someone like Pelot, who again is not going to have that much experience with Pirelli tires, for example. Now, moving on to our next driver, and again, I kind of alluded to who it was already with my comments, but it is, of course, Colton Herta. 24 years of age in IndyCar, just like Pelot, but driving for Andretti. And again, that Andretti connection is something that may help or may hinder things depending on your perspective. Of course, Michael Andretti was kind of the leading force in that bid, wanting to bring the 11th team to F1 as Andretti, but basically through politicking and other kind of backroom dealing, Michael Andretti basically had to get kicked out of the bid, and the team basically had to get rebranded as Cadillac for the FIA, or not the FIA, for FOM to approve of it. So I'm actually not sure at this point how much a connection with Andretti is going to help. But again, he's a driver who I think has been on F1's radar for quite some time. And I do believe Red Bull actually tried to sign him for 2023 instead of Nick DeVries, but he didn't have a super license, and the FIA wouldn't basically give him special dispensation for that. So again, 100 races in IndyCar. His best season result is second, which was last year. In terms of his career results, 9 wins, 14 pole positions. So again, honestly, not too far off of Pelot there, but just again doesn't quite have the consistency, I would say. The other comments I've seen quite commonly online with Herta is that he's much better on the street circuit road courses than on the ovals. And again, in F1, ovals aren't really an issue. So if he is indeed that good on street circuits, road courses, then there's a better chance that those skills can translate to F1 than a driver who is kind of the opposite. A driver who's really, really strong on ovals, but was weaker on street circuits, for example. And again, I've also heard that he's quite aggressive on his tires, and that could be an issue with the very, very fragile F1 Pirelli tires that we have. So again, that's another potential issue that could make transition to F1 a bit of a difficult task. He does have some European experience, but was quite a long time ago, and it was at quite a low-level series. So he raced in Euro Formula Open in 2016, I believe, finished third. So again, a decent result, but with Euro Formula Open, it's such a low-level series that, again, it's not really a reliable benchmark of how good of a talent you are. In terms of the likelihood that you would do well in Formula One. And again, a lot of what I just said about Pelot kind of applies to Herta. I would not sign him as a number one driver. I would want to really have an experienced driver, and then kind of have Herta as kind of a rookie driver, a young driver alongside him. Now, for the final 2 drivers in this video, both of these drivers who I would say are kind of complete rookies, not competing in F1, not competing in other high-level single-seater series, but they do have some, I guess, connection to the Cadillac Andretti team, and therefore thought might as well include them in this video. But I think definitely of the 8 drivers I've talked about today, I do think that the next 2 drivers are probably the most long shot ones, and as a result, that's why I've saved them for last. So first up is Jack Crawford, 19 years of age, driving in Formula 2 this year. This is his 3rd season in Formula 2. His best season result was 5th place, which he achieved last year. In his Formula 2 career, 2 wins, 1 pole position. So again, middling results. But he does have some contacts with Andretti. He's tested with Andretti in Formula E, and therefore, as a result, he does kind of have some connections already with some of the formerly Andretti personnel within the Formula One team. The other thing as well is he is American, and this is something I forgot to mention as well, but there has been some comment that the higher ups at Cadillac want to have an American driver drive for the team, something that has the American F1 team has never really had. But again, that's kind of why one of the reasons why Herta has been associated with the seat so much. But again, for Herta, I forgot to mention this, should have mentioned it, but again, doesn't have the super license points required, but I believe he needs fourth in this year's IndyCar series in order to get the necessary points for a super license. I think similar situation with Crawford. I'm not sure if he has a super license or not. The points for F2 are actually quite a bit more generous than they are for IndyCar, so he might actually have a super license already. But nonetheless, again, American driver, so I think that does help him compared to some other rookies who don't have an F1 seat for next year. In terms of median pole gap, first 2 years in Formula 2, his rookie season 2023, 0.568 seconds, which ranked 7th of the drivers on that grid. So again, not great. And then 2024, 0.62, which ranked 12th. So not a particularly strong qualifier. Race results, again, a bit of a mixed bag. I do think if he was chosen as a driver, he would be one of the weaker rookies to make his F1 debut. But again, that's why I think it's really an outside option. I think at this point, not really realistic. Next up is last driver on my list is Felipe Drugovich, 24 years of age, this year driving for Cadillac in IMSA. And again, that's kind of where that connection comes in. He does have kind of some connections with the Cadillac team. And again, I don't know how much of a connection there is between the IMSA team and the Cadillac IMSA team and the F1 team, just in the same way that, for example, there's not really much of a connection between the Aston Martin F1 team and the Aston Martin endurance team. It's just one of those things where it could just be an association just by name. But again, also Aston Martin reserve driver, and again, he's going to have quite a lot of experience with with us in the simulator. Plus, he also did F1 testing in 2023 in the place of Lance Stroll. Now, for his Formula 2 results, took him 3 seasons to win, but he did win the championship in 2022. In his 3-year career, 8 wins, 5 pole positions. And when you look at kind of his qualifying record in those 3 seasons, first season 2020, median pole gap of 0.406 seconds, which ranks 6th on the grid, so pretty good there. 2021, unfortunately, a bit of a step back, and I think that second season really hurt his chances of making it to F1. But that second season, median qualifying gap of 0.566 seconds, which ranked 5th. Before that final year, switching back to MP Motorsport, median pole gap of 0.198 seconds, which was best in the field that year. Qualifying ability, I would say probably a little bit better than Crawford, but still not really anything super special, and not something that I would say, lights the field. You know what I mean? Basically, I don't think he would be, if he was chosen for Cadillac in 2026, I don't think he would be an excellent qualifier. I think he would be, definitely below average. But in terms of raceability, I think, could be an interesting option there. So there you go. There's 8 drivers who I feel could be options for Cadillac for the 2026 F1 season. Who do you think would be your most likely, I guess, your preferred lineup, and who do you think will actually be the lineup? So I think for me, if I could choose the lineup right now, I would probably choose Valtteri Bottas and Yuki Tsunoda. A really good mix of experience, youth, but again, a pretty decent amount of speed between the two of them. And I think it's a lineup that you can, hold together for 2 to 3 years and not really have to worry about replacing either driver. But I think after that, Bottas, again, would be getting up there in age. So you would probably have to consider replacing him after 2 to 3 years. But for Tsunoda, I think he's a really young, really solid driver who you could build this team around for the next 5 or 6 years or so. In terms of what I think will actually happen, it's really hard to say. I think at this point, Tsunoda, again, it's really hard to say what's going to happen with him, again, with what's going on with Lawson. I think if Perez wants to see, I think he's probably got a really good chance of getting it. For Zhou, I think, for example, a lineup of Perez and Zhou, I think would be very underwhelming for a first season. Would bring you quite a lot of cash. And depending on how greedy Cadillac feel they are, that might be what we end up with. But that being said, I think if Herta gets his super license, I think he is almost a guarantee to get one of the 2 seats, and that would leave another seat for like a Tsunoda or a Bottas. So I think perhaps Bottas and Herta is most realistic option. So there you go. That's my kind of me discussing drivers who I think would be good candidates for Cadillac for the 2026 F1 season. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.